Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of the Straight Fire Podcast. It is a joy and a privilege to have you all listening. And if you're watching the YouTube video, we hope that you leave a like, watch all the way through, and comment a question that you would like us to deal with. Any podcast topics you'd like us to talk about, even just a simple question that we can talk about. In the first 5 minutes, we can have maybe a segment of just podcast time where it's just devoted to questions that you bring. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice that we once again have a new camera shot after promising you a new camera shot last week. This is probably going to be the only time you're ever going to see this camera shot because we agreed that it's way too hard to set up. And
they're going to be like, they only have 4 things. There's no way it's too hard to set up.
They don't see all like the lights and stuff that we have going on here.
And that it's a struggle for 3 teenage guys to try to make a room look good. So
yeah, that's very true.
Very true.
My own bedroom doesn't look this good, and that's not good considering the state that this room is in. But yeah, so that's if you're watching the YouTube video, that's just another reason to go check out the YouTube channel. I'm gonna start throwing out some shorts on there. Maybe move over to Instagram eventually. Put out some Instagram reels, TikTok because TikTok's still here, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you know I'm still standing? TikTok's still here, but yeah, that's basically all I have to start. Just support the podcast in any way you can, whether on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I was told we were on Amazon Music as well. Amazon Music, wherever you can find us, support. We always appreciate your support. And so with that, let's go ahead and jump straight into the topic, which is, Noah, why don't you give us the introduction of this topic? Because it was originally your idea.
Yeah, so we were thinking, we were trying to think of podcast topics. And I think like the original idea I had was like pieces of wisdom that we've learned over the years. And I was thinking about that and it was all right, but like I wanted it to be a little bit more direct. So I decided to submit the idea of like, hey, we're going to do generations. Right, we're gonna talk about wisdom that we can give to generations, even though, hey, maybe I'm not there yet. Maybe I'm not not super old. That's offensive. Maybe I'm not older yet, and I don't have that experience. But we can give wisdom from our perspective to those older people, and what we would want them, what we want them to do to help us grow. We can help the younger generations. There's 2, I think, younger generations now, right?
No, it's our generation, which is, well, we're Gen Z,
and
then
Alpha
and Beta, but we're not gonna. Technically, Beta started this year.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, but they could watch later, so we can give them wisdom too.
But like, I don't know why we'd separate Alpha and Beta.
Yeah, but okay. So we're gonna break this down. Go older generation.
Generations older than us. Our generation's younger than us.
Yeah. So, and just share wisdom, not from experience, at least for the older generations, but give tips that for them so they can help us more.
Well, you say experiences, but like how we're not going to share those, but our generation is divided from the older generation in such specific ways, like technology and, immorality. And our generation is very apt to pick up well, technology and immorality. I never knew those were in common until we started talking about our generation, but like I guess, unfortunately, one follows the other. But like we have experienced things that they like. Our preacher talks all the time. Like, kids on the street today, they have so much more opportunity through technology for these horrible things than they ever did. Right. And so like we do have experiences that they haven't had. I don't know if we'll dive into this podcast. That might be another podcast.
I'm sure when we give when we talk to younger generations and our generations, that there will be plenty of lessons that the older generations can take from that as well. Just as when older people talk to older people, that's experience that we can learn from. So hey, when I'm this age, I won't make that mistake, or I'll be like this. Even just because we have to be careful with this mindset of just because someone older is talking about something that doesn't apply to me now, that we just turn it off and stop listening, because one day it will apply to you, right? And just because that situation doesn't specifically apply to you, there's still valuable lessons that we can take from that.
Yeah, Landon, me and Noah have talked a lot at the start of this podcast. What are you looking forward to getting into on this podcast?
Oh, I mean, I'm just
this specific episode, I guess.
Yeah. No, so I think it's going to be interesting talking about the different generations. And when we talk about wisdom, you get wisdom one of 2 ways. from experience or from other people that have had those experiences giving it to you. And so, when we talk about like the older generations, when we think of wisdom, it's usually them giving it to us, and then younger generations, us giving it to them. I think it's going to be a little bit of a twist on that in this podcast, which will be interesting to see how that goes. But,
yeah, I do worry about the stereotype of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I mean,
I
how are the older generations going to learn from us? They're already so old.
Old people jokes.
No, I'm kidding. I think they make up a more majority of our podcast. Not old people, older people than us make up probably
going to get us canceled.
They're
calling
almost.
people old.
I think it's people our age. Well, I was going to say our podcast majority is people our age and people older than us. Obviously, older people. I think our podcast is. I think there's a few older people like who make up a good bit of our audience.
Yeah.
And then,
I was just going to talk about, especially before we get into this, the belief, especially, and it feels weird from my position bringing attention to this, but telling older people that, hey, young people have wisdom too. Just because we haven't lived as long doesn't mean we don't have experiences that we can share and things that you can learn. Obviously, we still respect their authority and we still respect, their opinion. They are our elders and we're supposed to give them the respect that they've earned through a long life of many different experiences. Hopefully they've had a good, faithful Christian life. But even if they haven't, they still have valuable life lessons that they can share. So but we too, even in our short 17-year average, just on average, we still have learned a lot. And we've learned things from other adults that maybe some adults haven't heard about,
let's go ahead and start with the very first question. What do we want to tell the generations older than us?
Do you want me to start, Landon?
Have at it, man. Have at it.
So I was thinking about this question because I was the one who came up with this topic, and I was thinking about I did the first two generations so easily. I did what I want to tell our generation and what I want to tell the younger generation. I thought of that so easily. Because I've been there recently. I know what I would want to hear if I was in that position. But the older generations was a very challenging one for me to find something to say that didn't, because what wisdom do I have to share? But I settled on the advice that I would like to give to older people is to challenge us, to challenge the youth of their day, to challenge the youth at their church, to challenge all the youth they know, because we only grow when we're pushed out of our comfort zone. I would not be the person I am today without adults making me do things that I didn't want to do, right? If I had it my way when I was a kid, I would have never done anything productive. I would have never pushed myself to be any better. And I'm so thankful for the opportunities that I was given and for the opportunities my parents made me take advantage of so I could become the person I am today. And I'm so thankful for that. And it's just this idea that you have to push young people around you, because if you're not pushing them, they're not going to grow. We have this false belief, and I think older people, not old people.
Yeah, you gotta stop saying that.
I know. I'm so sorry. I don't mean it. It's just it's rolling off the tongue a little bit. Older people have this belief that if we challenge our young people today, they're going to leave or they're going to become disinterested because it's too hard. And yes, if we only challenge them in a very hard way, in a very unmerciful, ungracious way, if that's the only way we challenge them, then of course, yes, they're going to fall away. But if we challenge them in a good way, in the way that God intends for us to challenge our youth, then they're going to grow. Right? Again, there is no growth if you're not pushed outside of your comfort zone. And that's what adults, that's what parents, and that's what, grandparents, even just people you look up to, that's what they're called to be. God we talked last week about God testing those people that he loved, right? They grew from that. God did not simply, Satan accused God of, well, you've put a hedge around him, so he's not going to turn.
Talking about Job.
Yeah, you've put a hedge around him, so he's not going to turn against you. And God was like, test him. Because I'm sure God had already tested him up to that point, and God had found Job worthy, right? So he found, because God was willing to put Job's faith to the test, Job grew so much more than he could have on his own. And that's the message that I wanted to kind of get across to the older people, because sometimes it's not fun to be somewhere where you're not challenged. We all want a challenge of growth, because that feeling of growing in wisdom and growing in knowledge is just it's so satisfying to us, but it only happens through a little bit of struggle. So if you want to, what does that look like? If you want to put that in practical terms, ask them questions. We have a debate class here that is very challenging. And the reason it is so is because they ask tough questions. They make you give tough answers, but also they're willing to help you when you don't know the answers, right? And I think that's a good example of older people. Ask questions to your youth. Ask tough, challenging questions. Help them find those answers. Put them in situations where they're going to have to do something they've never done before, and it just make this culture of always where your youth is always ready to grow. And that was the message. That was one of the messages I thought about as I was researching this podcast.
Well, Landon, I would throw it over to you, but Noah took all your time, so we're gonna have to move on to the next one. No, I'm kidding. That was really good. I've often thought that same thought about, like, I want to be challenged by the people older than me. But Landon, go ahead and what do you think? What do you think about that? Do you agree with that? Would you rebut that? What do you think?
Oh no, I love that. Challenging is something very important, and I don't know how to word it, but the church being how it is, and you have a youth group, and you have a college group, and you have a young professionals group, and then you have the older people that don't really do anything with anyone, and you've got this segregate. And I'm not saying that because, and it happened like that because we do stay in the youth group, we do stay in the college group, and so we've segregated ourselves like this, and so it is this problem where we have a bunch of youth growing up, and where is the wisdom? Well, because we're not being around people. And I want to say this right now to the older people, and this is going to sound bad for my generation, and I'm going to get on that when we get to ours. But
I say, just wait, old people. We're going to trash our own generation. It's coming.
Yeah, it's going to be really bad too. I'm prepping myself for that.
A lot of the time, teenagers aren't going to go to you.
Mm-mm.
You're going to have to go to them. And I know that sounds like, well, that's not my job to have to go to someone else. But the truth is, well, and for our generation, as sad as as sad as it is to say that, you're going to have to go to them. And so when we think about this idea of challenging, I just wanted to build off that first. I'll let you talk, and we'll jump between thoughts here just to keep everyone flowing. But the idea of challenging, I do like that because it's getting both sides involved, because we've built such a culture, that's a word for it, where I come to church, I come to worship, and I stay with the youth group, and that's all I talk to. I leave, and the only other Christians that I'm going to talk to outside of this building is going to be the youth group, because they're the only ones I'm going to go hang out with, and that's our fault. But there's going to have to be work on both sides.
You know what our church does, and I'm not like, man, our elders messed up doing this. I would never say that, because people of the same age find it the easiest to be. I find it easiest
Absolutely.
to be around people my age, right? And people younger than me, mainly because of growing up with a younger brother and just having his friends around a lot. I'm comfortable with people younger than me, but like, we have classes that are segregated by age, which of course that's the standard. So I'm not saying anything wrong there. Like classes from first grade to fifth grade, and then once you get into sixth grade to 12th grade, you're in the youth group, and then you're in the college group, and then you're in the young pro group, and then you're in the. There's not really a group between that, home builder,
Middle-aged.
and then you're in.
The politically correct term is home builder. But
Home builder. You're in the home builder group, and then you're in golden seniors. That's what our church calls it. Your church probably has some kind of. There's a lot of churches that have like super seniors. I'm trying to think of other names I've heard.
The life group.
The life group, yeah. And so our class, like Landon said, like I show up, I sit with my youth section, I go to class with my youth section, and then I go home and do it all again Sunday evening, Wednesday night. Like, I wonder, maybe a solution to that could be like, what if instead of having youth class, we just draw random numbers and like, hey, all the number 2s go to this class, and we just
What if we did a like a men's class where it's like the youth group and like, you know, older men and like,
but then you're segregating it by gender. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think he has a point there, because we find in Timothy where he says the older women are to teach the younger women, and that would apply too for older men to teach the younger men. And I mean that does happen in our classes,
yeah.
but there's a reason that's in the Bible, you know.
And I guess I say all that to say maybe we as young people, but also to the older generation, you're going, like what Landon said, you're going to have to prioritize walking up to us because we find it very hard to walk up to you. And that's not like, oh my goodness, he looks scary, like I'm not going to walk up to that guy. It's just not in our nature, specifically now. Like, it is well documented the communication struggles our generation has in today's world. We can't put sentences together. You've listened to this podcast long enough to know that we struggle heavily with communication. But like, and so we just find it hard to walk up to people, especially people we don't know that well. And just you being a different age than us adds just another challenge on top of it. But, you know, I think by segregating our congregation, it can make it a lot weaker, right? Instead of one unified unit, it's a lot of separate ones that can be picked off, right? If youth group's having problems, we don't view it as, well, the whole church is having problems. No, it's just the youth group. But is the youth group not part of the church, right? If there was a section of members that were having problems, we'd be like, well, this church is having problems because of these members. But we don't feel that way when it comes to the youth group. We just think that, well, the youth group is having problems, not the church. But by having that attitude, by separating them out specifically, you are, again, segregating it and making this problem worse. And I'm not saying, you know, older people are doing this. I'm just saying we as in a church do this. The youth group does this. You know, we all do this. And maybe it's not healthy. Maybe it's time we shake things up a little bit.
I think a long time ago, not a long time ago, but like one of the first podcasts we did, we talked about trees, and we talked about how their roots like interconnect with each other, so it makes them like really, really hard to knock down. And if you almost want to think about it, like we have the youth group tree over here, we have the college tree over here, we have the young pros tree over here. If the youth group tree gets sick and is dying, it has no support because the other trees are so disconnected from it. They're really not going to know anything's wrong. And of course, we still have the parents of the youth group, and obviously they're very supportive, and they're going to fix any problems that arise. But it doesn't just need to be the parents, it needs to be the whole church. The whole church needs to be invested in the youth group. And they are invested in the youth group. I fully and 100% believe that in every good Church of Christ. But there has to be involvement. It can't just be we want them to succeed, but how can I help them succeed? You know, and that's this idea of you can't grow in your comfort zone. The youth group's not going to grow if they don't go talk to older people, and older people aren't going to grow if they don't go talk to the youth.
And that's the challenge you're talking about. Because I was trying to think about, like, how does this tie back to the challenge? And that is the challenge of you walking up to the youth group is the challenge. Because even I, at my age, find a group of teenagers to be intimidating.
And again, we don't have to make this so hard on ourselves. You don't have to walk up to the whole youth group, but go walk up to a teenager and have a conversation with them. And I almost said I guarantee. I can't guarantee it.
I would not guarantee that.
But most of the time, I think you'll leave being encouraged by, the younger. And because that's what we're supposed to do. The younger are supposed to encourage the older, and the older are supposed to encourage the younger, right? That's what we're commanded to do. And sometimes it's hard because we show up and the only thing we do is we sit with the people our own age. We go to class with the people our own age. That's the only people we see. So it's good to go challenge yourself and to go, hang out with people with so much more wisdom than we do, or different wisdom than the wisdom we have.
Landon, sorry, I was popping my neck. Wow, it really got me too. Landon, can you draw the lines between what we're all saying here? Can you bring it together?
Yeah, I got you.
Because we've said a lot of good things, but like I need for Benjamin's mind, he needs to see like the the big picture here, like
Yeah.
the summary, right? I need to see that, I think, for it to finally click.
So I think I want to preface it with this. When we talk about this challenge, we're not saying that this is just the older people's job. It just was the best time to go ahead and bring it up because this is a bridge that has to be built from both sides, not just one. And so when we talk about this idea of challenging, it is for the older people to teach the younger, but the younger are to encourage the older. And so it's a bridge that's having to be built from both sides. So we're not saying that this is just the older people's problem. I just want to go ahead and clear that out now, just so there's no. I don't want people thinking, well, those Gen Zers think it's all our fault, you know. Yeah. And I just want to clear the air on that.
Sometimes, but no, I'm kidding.
Well, you know, but and I think Noah's done a really good job about talking about the challenge of what, like, we do want that. And a lot of people our age are insecure about talking to anyone but their friends, and the truth is they're not going to initiate anything like that. But the truth is we're in need of wisdom.
Desperate need.
And the only way we're going to get it without going through things that we could not have gone through if we would have had that wisdom is for older people to give it to us. And the only way that's going to happen is if they talk to us. And so I think a lot of that is the challenge. And, you know, when we talk about the youth group, I want to say this, and I'm about to say something that a lot of people are going to be like, did you just say that? So I want you to bear with me. There's a statement that I've heard growing up. Here we go. They both looked at me. I know they're both locked in.
To dramatically gasp after you say it.
There's a statement that I've heard for a long time growing up, and that is the youth is the future of the church. I do not like that statement at all. Yeah, there it is.
I can like exasperately croak. I cannot gasp.
No, I know where you're going. I know where you're going because
and
I've heard this before.
Yeah, a lot of people have heard this, and I completely understand where this is coming from. There's going to be a time where our generation is going to have to step up and be the next minister, the next song leader, the next elder, the next deacon. I understand what is meant by the statement that we are the future of the church, but what is implied in that statement is that I'm the future, not the now. Mm-hmm. When you tell the youth that you're the future of the church, whether you mean it or not, what you're implying is you're the future, but you're not the now. And what we have to understand is that the youth, though they may not be the elders and the deacons, they do have their part to play. And though well-meaning people make that statement without meaning it, sometimes what is implied by that is, okay, you know, until I turn 18, then I really have no role in the church. Yeah. And that's just something that we can't have happening. And it's just an interesting statement that I've always been like, I understand where it's coming from, but I disagree.
So, talking to the older generation, be willing to challenge us, be willing to talk to us, you know, and that can look different for your need, right? It doesn't, like Noah said, it's not one person walking up to the entire youth group. It's you walking up to one person, two people, right? And talking.
Paul didn't grab a bunch of kids. He grabbed Timothy.
Yeah, exactly.
He grabbed Titus.
Exactly. And so I think that's important here because I'm trying to wrap this up because we desperately need to move on because I know that when we get to our generation, we're just gonna, you know, let loose upon our generation. I'm sure Noah has even probably 2 times much to say as he did to our
older
generation.
people thought us, you know, talking to them was bad. Just wait. Just wait.
Okay, so talking to our generation now. We have instructed the older generation to challenge us. Now, what are we saying to our generation? Landon, go ahead before Noah comes in. Maybe he'll cut short a little bit off of his speech.
Listen, I mean, we are in a generation where we want what we want, and I want it now, and I'm right. And that's a lot, and that is like, oh, you cannot just say that about me. And that's something that even I struggle with sometimes. I'm right, and I know I'm right, and I'm going to prove that I'm right. And I think debate class didn't help with that in a lot of ways.
That's very true.
And now that I know that I'm right, I want what I want, and I want it now. And these are some things that I would argue probably everyone in our generation to some extent struggles with. But the truth is, man, just listen. There's so many things that we go through in our lives, and I could list, I'm not going to, but I could list examples of things that's happened in my life. If I would have just sat down and been quiet and listened to people that were older than me, I would not have had to go through things that, though I did get wisdom from it, I would have gotten that wisdom without ever having to go through those things. And so the first thing I would say, I'm gonna keep it to one point, we can go around, but listen.
I'm going to build off that before. I just feel like Noah's just this final boss that we're all waiting on.
Bro, why am I being attacked?
Yeah, this podcast has been especially bad.
I'm not a part of this generation.
I think it's because how you start. I think it's because you just started.
Actually, I am.
You started with it had to have been at least 3 minutes. It had been at least 3 minute monologue, which was very impressive, to be fair, to the older generation. If you get some side eyes tonight at church, well, no, it won't be out tonight. But if you get some side eyes next Sunday, you know why. But anyway, what I would say to build off of what Landon said is that when you don't listen, you build a reality that isn't true. I think a lot of times we find young people in a world that's not real, right? Because they're very specific about what they listen to, right? The only news, like we make jokes like, yeah, I get my news off of TikTok now. Like we make that joke a lot, because it's funny and right, like you shouldn't do that, right? But that's very real, as in a sense of we get our sense of self and opinions from our own echo chamber that we make. Everything our generation consumes is built off of an algorithm made to keep you there longer, right? And what that makes is echo chambers. We as young, and that's why it's easier to hang out with people our age, because most often people with our age have our views, right? And so young people our generation finds themselves in an echo chamber that is really hard to escape because we love the affirmation it gives us, right? When we're talking on this podcast, I don't really have to worry about are Noah and Landon gonna agree with me on this? We're all pretty much of no, you don't think
No, we
y'all don't agree with me all the time?
We are. I do. Yeah, we do.
Okay. Usually, yeah.
99.9.
I knew it. I was waiting for they're not. There's no way.
No, yeah.
But anyway, I don't have to worry about what I say in this podcast because, no one Landon, we're all of the same mind here. But there's a lot of people out there who they don't have to worry about what they say at work because everyone at work agrees with them, right? It's an echo chamber that we get caught up in, and it's dangerous for young people because they lose sense of reality when it happens, right? The whole reason we have such radical political views in our country is because of this echo chamber that keeps on giving these same reasonings in just different ways, different emotional ploys, and they keep being targeted to young people, and the young people is just added to their echo chamber, right? You got to be very careful because this echo chamber is controlled by things that you're not in charge of, right? And I think that's what I would say is listen to those around you and be willing to listen to opinions that aren't yours. And that's what debate does such a good job of, is you getting to hear opinions that you don't especially agree with. No, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I just want to build off what you and Landon said. Even if the opinions, you don't want to go around listening to lies and things that aren't true, but you have to be willing to listen to other people and hear them out, because you won't know what they need unless you listen to them. Even if your quote unquote echo chamber is the truth. And I think we were designed to, in a perfect world where everyone is Christians, we can all affirm each other because we all believe truth. But sadly, that's not the world we're in. But even if you are in a faithful congregation where you are affirmed in the truth, you still need to listen to other people who don't have the truth so you can help them, so you can listen to what they need. Or maybe you're about to make a bad decision and you can listen to people in your church try to help you. Because I know sometimes, especially as guys, we all get really headstrong and we're like, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. I don't care what anyone tells me what to do.
Yeah.
And I know that's that's kind of what Landon was talking about. It's so difficult to not just go headstrong and dive all in. And I have a passage I want to read that I was thinking about while you and Landon were talking about it. It's Proverbs chapter 3 verses 5, starting in verse 4, and I'm gonna read a few verses out of Proverbs 3, and it says, "And so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones." And then skipping down to verse 14, it says, "For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold." So that was the passage I was looking at, and I just thought that really echoed what y'all said. Well, we're not leaning on our own understanding, but we're looking to God. I know I've been talking for a long time.
No, you're good. I was mainly joking. I probably shouldn't have joked as much because now people are gonna keep thinking about
And
it. I
I-
would hate to give people Noah fatigue. It's just something
but
I've grown
one
up
of the
with.
really quickly, one of the things, and this I think this builds off what y'all said. One of the things that I thought to tell this generation was, waiting is worth it. And it's just this idea of we're waiting for heaven, right? Satan wants to tell us and keeps telling our generation right now, because you're young, you need to get everything you can. You need to get all the pleasures you can. You need to get all this earthly joy right now, because hey, when you're old, you're not going to be able to have this anymore, right? This is your one shot at this. So take it all now. And I think every generation feels this way, but I think Satan speaks to our generation about this, especially because right now, your chemicals are rushing. You're young. I don't know how else to say it. I'm not gonna say it again though.
I would say I would call it hormones.
Yeah, hormones. You're young. You're able to do pretty much whatever you want at any point in time. You have the time to do whatever you want. You can conquer whatever battlefield you want to at this age, right? You can do anything. And Satan is like, take it all now. Use up everything you have, all of your resources to pursue whatever pleasure you want to till its end. And don't worry about the consequences now. Those will catch up with you when you're older, and when you're older, you'll be able to handle it. But that's not really true. We and I was doing some research into this, teenagers are more prone to see things in the here and now because their brain, the part of their brain that looks at consequences of the future, like their planning part of their brain and their consequence part of their brain isn't as developed as adults is. So teenagers are much more likely to see the here and now than they are to wait, let me think about how this is going to affect my or how the consequences of this action are going to affect me later.
I think you talked about that in an older podcast.
I'm sure I did.
Like that's really taking me. There's probably, if I saw the title of it, I would know that you did. But like I feel like you said that before. I mean, it's a great point. It's a great point, and I'm glad you were able to find it and bring it back, because that's very true. I mean, consequence and effect just doesn't always matter as much to us as it does to people older than us.
Yeah, because they've got so much more life experience. If you think about it, we don't have as much life experience, so waiting is not as final to it's waiting is more of a big deal to us because we haven't been around as long, so that seems like a longer time. Whereas older people who have been around for triple the time that we have been, they know how to wait for things, right? Because they just have more life experience. So to us, we feel like we're not going to be here for a long time, and I need to do this while I'm young, while I can enjoy it. So Satan is telling us over and over again just to take it. But God, when the Bible talks about young men, he always says, young men, like, resist the devil, flee from him, flee youthful passions and lusts, because God knows how hard it is at this age to stay away from sin, right? Because that's what we're drawn into it as younger people with less life experience. So this idea of waiting for what God has promised us, because it will be worth it. And Satan tries to tell us that it isn't worth it, but it will be. In 1 Peter 1, 4-9, there's a beautiful description of what heaven is like if we will only wait. And it's going to be painful waiting. It's not easy. It's not fun, but it will be worth it one day. It is a joy that will never fade away, unlike the earthly joys here. And then in Revelation 21:4, it's talking about the final victory of God's people and how one day all this waiting and all this suffering and all this denying ourselves, one day we won't have to do that anymore, and God will give us every joy that we can think of. So just to the teenagers of this generation, wait. Listen to the people who are older than you. Really try to just think about your actions, how that's going to affect your future, and think about where that puts you and your relationship with God.
I think both of y'all talking about listening and waiting is really good for this generation, because this generation lacks a word that I've learned over this year. It's called fortitude, right? And you listening know what fortitude is, but you might not have heard this definition. Actually, I'm gonna pull it up real quick. Landon, is there anything you want to say while I'm pulling this up?
Yeah, I got you.
I don't know if I can pull it up as fast as I need to. So
yeah, I'll fill in. Right, yeah,
Thank you
I'll
so
put in
much.
some filler. No, I think you want to know almost the ironic part of this. We started with listen to those that are older than you, and we talked about waiting, and the reason you should wait is because your brain's not fully developed, is really what we're saying. And that is true. And, you think about how we in our youth, and this is where we start building the bridge from the other side, going back to my metaphor of the older people and the younger, how we need to work on this together. I think of, was it Jeroboam and Rehoboam? It was the divided kingdom. Which one was it that was?
Jeroboam.
Was it Jeroboam? I always get the two mixed up. And he was...
No, it was Rehoboam.
Was it?
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Rehoboam.
It was one of them. We're going to go with Rehoboam because Noah
Rehoboam.
seems very confident.
I'm confident in Rehoboam.
Noah seems very confident. And there was a decision that needed to be made. And he decided to ask the older wise men, as one would usually do in those cases. And they gave an answer that he didn't exactly like. And so instead he went to his peers, the people his age, and instead got a response he liked. And the consequences for those actions were less than good. Yeah. And so we think about why it is that we should listen to those that are older, is because they do have this wisdom. And wisdom is being able to see future events and the consequences that will come after that. And so that's the wisdom of that. And I think it's ironic that the wait and listen just kind of loop together.
Yeah, and really quickly before Bridget says anything, teenagers still have the ability. It's not, we say like, hey, your brain's developed. You really don't have a choice. You're not going to be as good as planning. You still have the choice.
Yeah.
It's just harder right now than it will be in the future.
So,
but it's still worth it.
What waiting, what listening, what making harder choices leads to is a word called fortitude, and I wasn't able to find the exact wording, which stinks because that means I'm gonna have to try to summarize it off memory, and that's just I wouldn't put that fate upon my worst enemy. But fortitude is the choice of doing hard things instead of giving yourself a pass, right? And we live in a world that is eager to reward ourselves. I remember my first weeks at work, we had a vending machine. And I'd get through a day and be like, hey, I got through a day of work. You know what I deserve? I deserve a candy bar. And so after work, I'd always get myself a candy bar. And I don't do it now because I'm practicing fortitude. And being broke helps with practicing fortitude. But having fortitude is being able to do hard things even when you don't want to do them. And that's just something that I'm worried our generation is starting to lack, right? Because of the instant gratification that we have, right? I don't want to listen to you because that is hard and it doesn't give me the instant gratification that I want. I don't want to wait for this thing because it's hard and it doesn't give me the instant gratification that I want. Fortification is that has been the word I'm saying, right? Fortitude. That's right. Thank you. Fortitude is the exact opposite of that. Fortitude is the willingness to wait, the willingness to listen, the willingness to do the hard thing, and understanding that it will lead to something better in the future, right? You think about that word fortitude, what it comes from, like a fort, right? Simply having walls that protect you. Building those walls are not fun at all. I'm sure, probably you think about when the first settlers come here, we have that picture of like the wooden walls, right, with the logs and like the steep, like the chiseled log points. I'm sure that when they got here, the last thing they wanted to do was start building walls, right? There's so much to do. You got to worry about food, your own shelter, your family and your family's health. But first things first, you got to build a wall. And that's what fortitude is saying. First things first, you got to do the hard thing. And I worry about our generation being able to do that. So for those of you listening, I challenge you, choose the hard thing, right? Even if it's the little things, right? I'm not going to sit out on my phone for, half an hour before I start doing the things that need to be done, right? It's this idea of like, I'm going to eat the vegetables first so I can get to the good stuff later, right? Instead of the other way around. Yeah, no, I know we're not the biggest vegetable fans here. If we were in Babylon, we had just showed up and the king offered us a bunch of meat to eat, we would all be like, yes, it's everything I've dreamed of.
I said, they don't let us eat this back in Israel.
My mom said we couldn't have it. So nice. But anyway, it's just.
Did we see Daniel eating broccoli? Ew, gross.
But apparently that was that was the best thing to eat, right? What you wouldn't expect, right? Fortitude is doing the hard things that you don't expect are gonna. Well, they're gonna work. You just know it's gonna take time, right? And Daniel knew that eating vegetables was gonna work. I mean, and he resolved himself to that fate because I don't know if I could do the same. Vegetables and water is a far cry from what we eat nowadays. I'm just thinking about our lunch that consisted of blackberry lemonade.
We had
Hot wings.
We had a salad.
Hot wings.
We
and
had a
little bit
salad.
of yeah,
We
salad
had a
covered
salad.
in dressing and like crouton crumbs.
There
and-
was green on my plate. That is an improvement.
That's true.
circling back around. I'm sorry, I derailed us there. Doing the hard thing first. That's what fortitude is. That's what listening and waiting involves. It's doing the hard thing first. And I worry about our generation being able to do that. But prove me wrong, please. I'm begging you to prove me wrong. I hate being a prophet. What's the expression? I hate to be a prophet.
I have no idea.
I think that's it. Anyway, anything else before we move on to the final one?
Nope. I say run it.
I'm good.
Oh wow. Okay.
Beta babies, here we come, baby.
That never happens. All right, beta.
Alpha, beta, and alpha. Listen up.
Alpha, beta. What will be the next one? What's the next letter? Gamma? Alpha, beta, gamma?
Is it? Wouldn't it be a
Gamma.
D?
Is
or
it gamma
C?
or gamma?
Is gamma C?
Yeah.
I thought, and isn't D delta? Why is it
Alpha,
alpha,
beta,
beta, gamma? That's a G. Then
Welcome to
delta.
Greek.
Because
Bro,
it's
that's
Greek. No, it's not.
Unless you're like in the army, then it'd be Charlie. Alpha, beta, Charlie.
Oh,
Delta.
I think-
Oh yeah.
So I don't know how they're
It'll
gonna go
probably
with
be
that.
Charlie.
It'll probably be Charlie.
No, guys, the Greek letter isn't. There's no way
Generation
there's a Greek
Chuck.
letter named Charlie.
generation.
No, there's not. I'm just saying.
the
so
generation
like
named
it
Charlie.
would go in like the army, Alpha, Beta, Charlie.
Delta.
But-
So are we?
yeah.
So are we naming these generations off of Greek letters, or are we naming them off of the army?
We'll find out.
Yeah, we're gonna find out.
That's ironic, actually. I've got a quote from a Greek soldier.
really.
I really
Do you want to go and read that?
I'll wait.
Okay, so what are we saying to this younger generation? Honestly, I haven't thought much about this because right now they're the farthest thing from my mind. As sad as that is, but I'm really worried about my generation and if we're gonna make it out.
Well, the good news is if our generation doesn't make it out, we can still have good people train the generation younger than us, and hopefully they'll fare better.
Can I guess
than
what
we do.
quote it is? Is it the quote about like hard times
Nope.
make okay? No, not like hard times make good people.
Nope.
And then good people make easier times, which makes
It's not that quote.
okay. All right. Anyway, so no, do you want to start off then?
Yeah, I will.
Give us your quote.
Yeah. But
So the thought that I had, and I try to keep them really, really short, just so when we summarize this, it's going to be really easy. The thought I had for the younger people was to start now. And Landon, if you could flip to
did
first,
you say start now?
start now, yeah. Landon, if you could flip to 1 John 2:13 through 14.
Oh, he went to 1 John again.
I will get there in just a minute.
1 John what?
2:13 through 14. I'll get there in
Okay.
just a minute. But it's this idea of there will be actually let me go ahead and read you the quote first and then I'll elaborate on it because I think it sums up what we're trying to say really well. It illustrates what we're trying to say really well. The quote is from just a Greek soldier a long time ago. He said, "You do not rise to the occasion, but sink to the level of your training." And it's this idea of, hey, when the hard times come, you're going to fall back onto what you know, right? And I remember when I was younger, not that much younger, but when I was younger than I was now, and I didn't really have that much experience, sorry. I didn't really have that much experience dealing with negative viewpoints of the Bible, and they still kind of like shocked me, and I didn't know how to handle them. I remember I stumbled across a debate, and I was listening to the debate, and it was really, really challenging at that point in time. And I really didn't know, like, for a minute there, when you're listening to it, you don't really know how I'm gonna handle these arguments that are attacking the thing I've believed my entire life. I didn't really know how I was gonna, handle that or deal with that because the people who are giving these arguments sound really, really convincing. But I remembered and I fell back onto what I had been taught of there are some things that I know are true that agnostics who don't believe in the Bible will never be able to prove. Right? These things that I know are true, that I fall back on when things are hard, right? Even if I don't have the answers for this right now, I still have this foundation that will never be shaken. It's this, I fall back onto because I know we all want to have this belief of when hard times arise, we're going to rise even higher above those, but that's not really how it works. We are going to fall back to what we know, and if we don't have this great foundation that we started at, then we're not going to have anything good to fall back on. And, I would tell the younger generation, it seems little, it seems small now, but put in the work, Read your Bible every day. Start building a foundation of wanting to learn more. And I promise you, when you get older, you'll be thankful for that. Because I am thankful for that. Because honestly, I've heard some things, and if I didn't prepare myself in the way I did, if I didn't have, going back to the first thing we talked about, if I didn't have people challenge me the way I have been challenged, I probably wouldn't have been able to handle any of those attacks on my faith. But thankfully, I'm glad that I was challenged, and I have this foundation to rely upon, these things that I know are true, that no one will ever be able to disprove, that I will continue to build on for the rest of my life. So to the younger generations, start now. Landon, if you'll go ahead and read 1 John 2:13 through 14.
Yeah. I write to you, fathers, because you have known him who is from the beginning. I write to you, young men, because you have overcome the wicked one. I write to you, little children, because you have known the Father. I have written to you, fathers, because you have known him who is from the beginning. I have written to you, young men, because you are strong, and the word of God abides in you, and you have overcome the wicked one.
So this is just a summary to all of the generations, and I think that John, of course, sums it up better than we do. You know, young men, you have overcome the wicked one, right? It's going to be tough, but you can overcome him. It's not impossible. You know, to the older men, and there's a passage in 1 Timothy. Let me flip over there. I was on Proverbs. In 1 Timothy, you know, do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, with all purity. This idea of this is our family, right? And we're looking out for our family. To the younger generation, we're going to help them build that foundation. So when hard times come, they have people they can come to. To our generation, we're going to help them try to listen, help them try and wait and realize that it's worth it. And then to the older generation, we're going to treat them like our fathers. Treat them with the respect that they deserve, and come to them when we have something that we can't figure out on our own. And I think John and Timothy do a great job of describing how these different roles in the church should work.
Landon, would you add on to that, or?
I mean, very shortly.
I have something here. If you don't, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I mean,
very short.
No, I was like, yeah,
I mean,
he
he did a good job. I mean, I think of, as someone who has 4 nephews and a niece that is in this generation, this is something that I have thought about, like pressure. Yeah, that's the word, is pressure. And, you know, you think about like what, and I think that's probably in few words, because I like how we're keeping it a word or two, like for each of them. Start now. I think of 1 Timothy, 4:12, let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers. I was about to try to quote it, but I get them all mixed up. In word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. And you have all of these areas. And I know as someone that was at that age, I don't know what the exact age is for Alpha, but younger than I am. I just know it's somewhere in there.
I'm not sure.
Is it like 13 to...
I can look
It's
up.
got to be 13 to like 1, I think.
Yeah, because the new generation like just came.
Just started. But as someone that was in those ages, thinking about...
between 2010 and 2024.
So
14.
That
is...
So 14, yeah. 14,
okay.
Anywhere from 14 to 1.
Yeah.
So I was close. But as someone that was in those... At one point in those ages, thinking about, like, you know, you still do have your role to play. Maybe at that age, not as a Christian, but as someone, you can still be an example to the believers. But I think start now probably is the best advice one could give.
I'm sorry, I was reading the Google thing about Gen Alpha, and one of the things is adaptable. Generation Alpha is known for being adaptable and entrepreneurial.
Huh.
I don't know where that came from, but...
They're 14.
Yeah, I know. Have they done enough? Well, here I am again, doubting young people. I'm saying, have they done enough to really be considered? But, you know, they can do enough if we just challenge them. But I have a quote that I'd like to read that I was thinking that Noah was going to do. But this isn't by Greg Shoulder. This is by G. Michael Hopf, Hopf. And it's from a book called Those Who Remain, or it's from something called Those Who Remain. I'm not out here recommending this book. This quote is just, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And I feel really bad. Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to be a circle. And I feel really bad because y'all are doing this great point of like waiting and listening and how like one word. And I got lost on this thing about fortitude and how, you know, but hopefully it all works its way together, right? Y'all see what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Hopefully it all works its way together, because I would say to Generation Beta
And Alpha.
and Alpha, unfortunately, the good times that we've had have created weak men. We see that in our politics. We see that on social media. We see that in every facet of life. We see people who were weaker than what our country and what our world needs. And so these weak men are going to create hard times for you. And hopefully these hard times make you stronger. I hate the fact that you're going to have to go through that. I hate the fact that our generation, Gen Z, is staring down that barrel as well. It's not fun, but, I pray that when that happens, we will rise to the challenge by falling back to what we've known, as Noah said earlier, and we will understand that as long as let me bring it all together. As long as we wait and listen to those who are older than us, and as long as we are willing to commit to those who aren't just in our age range and who aren't just people we deem, worthy, or people who are who agree with us. As long as we have all of those things, when the hard times do come, if we're able to fall back on all of the things that we've learned throughout for all the generations before us and observing the generations under us, hopefully those hard times will lead us to fall back on what we know and make good times once again, right? And the thing is about the Word of God, in hard times, the Word of God thrives even more. So for those of you who are listening, who want to spread the Word of God and who want to challenge others to spread the Word of God, know that the Word of God thrives when times get hard. So there's no reason you shouldn't as well. There's no reason you can't step up to this challenge the way that the people before you have, right? Just because we haven't had hard times in the recent past, doesn't mean we won't have hard times in the future. So that's what I'm saying. Step up to the challenge with the fortitude that you have by listening and waiting, and by respecting those who are older than you. Are we adding anything else before we close, or Landon? Go ahead.
One thought, because
that
was a perfect segue. I just thought of something interesting, and it is literally a statement using all of the words that we use to start this whole thing out. The challenge is to listen and wait. That you should start now to have the fortitude for the hard times. It all kind of flowed together.
That's
to
what
make,
I was trying to say.
There
it is.
To make one major point, and that's exactly what you did. I just thought it was interesting. I know that kind of abrupted his perfect ending,
that was
but
awesome.
I thought it was interesting that every single one of our words ended to the point that he just made.
Yeah, I think that was Landon really saved me there. But I think unless Noah has something, I think the podcast is going to close there. Yeah, it was a great podcast. We're thankful for all of you for watching and listening. We pray that you go support the YouTube video, go recommend it to a friend. Maybe that can be a great conversation starter for talking to older people. Older people, you can walk up to your youth group and be like, hey, I heard this podcast by these young whippersnappers called the Straight Fire Podcast. Maybe you've heard of it. And then just, however you can share the podcast, we are always extremely grateful. We want to thank you for listening. We pray that you'll tune in for the next episode, listen to the episodes that you haven't listened to, and we'll see you all guys next time. Thanks.